Uh, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear colleagues. I am Joseph Bahou, the director of AUB's Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs, and I'm honored and humbled to moderate today this webinar. I'll introduce it very quickly as I can. We are commemorating, I don't know if it's the right term, a year of after this crucial event that was October 7, that is now apparently shaking the entire region. To remind us a little bit, October 7 came in what we could have considered then in a blue sky in a way or another. I just remember Jake Sullivan, the American National Security Advisor, 3 weeks before October 7, having a very important interview or article where he said that the Middle East has barely or rarely been so calm for decades. And yes, we could have had this optical illusion. We had normalizations in the region. We had the US slowly preparing to maybe pivot to somewhere else. And the Palestinian question, for probably bad reasons, was starting to also wind down on the international agenda. October 7 came as a thunder and it shook everything. But it also triggered what is today appearing as a seismic shift in the region towards something that is, at least for me, still very much unknown. And this is why also our webinar today is very important. We are now in a full-fledged open war with Lebanon. Probably the West Bank will not remain stable. There are questions about Israel taking on Iran. So we are really at on the verge of maybe a regional, complete total flare-up of violence. What have started by Netanyahu on October 7 in the evening as a sort of punitive campaign against Gaza and its people, its inhabitants, is today taking the shape, I think we all agree, of a maybe foolishly illusionary adventure of changing the Middle East order. We'll ask this question. I think this is my take, is that no country in the Middle East today will probably escape what is happening to a degree or another. This is why it was very important for us a year after October 7 to reflect, of course, on October 7, on the event as such, but today with the magnitude of events that are unfolding, I think it's also important to shed a regional perspective, a cross-regional perspective from all angles in the immediate region, I would say, surrounding the cauldrons, surrounding the epicenter of the seism. And this is why we have very distinguished speakers today with us that will explain to us what is to be expected, first of all, on the Palestinian level, on the Israeli-Palestinian level, but also from the angles of Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, and the entire region. We have an exceptional lineup of panelists for today's discussion. We have made it very consistent that we wanted people who are both experts, academic experts, research experts, but also practitioners. Our panelists today are all people who held or still hold official positions in a way or another, sometimes at very crucial positions. I apologize for the time being for a few minutes. We were supposed to have Dr. Mustafa Barghouti with us, who's a prominent Palestinian figure, member of the Palestinian Legislative Council and PLO. Dr. Barghouti has had a technical problem pertaining to transportation. He's joining us as soon as he can. But our other panelists, and I'll introduce them very quickly and then more when they take the floor. We have with us Dr. Marwan Maasher, or Minister Marwan Maasher, former Vice Prime Minister of Jordan, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, now a Vice President of the Carnegie Endowment in Washington, and a very good friend of AUB, formerly member of the Board of Trustees and a friend of our institute. Also, thank you, Marwan, for joining us. We have Nassif Hitti, who you probably also know, former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Lebanon. Dr. Hitti resigned from the government 3 days before the Beirut blast. Marwan, I don't think you knew anything about it, I guess. And Nassif Hitti, Dr. Hitti is, besides being also a very solid academic on Middle Eastern affairs, has for a very long time been an ambassador at the Arab League, a very high-level diplomat at the Arab League. He represented the League in France, Italy, the Vatican, and elsewhere. And then we have Hisham Youssef, who's also now a new coming fellow with us at IFI. Thank you, Hisham. Dr. Youssef is also a former both Egyptian diplomat, but also an Arab League official. Hisham Youssef occupied very sensitive, very crucial functions at the Arab League as a chief of staff and spokesman and advisor of the former Secretary General of the League, and he was also Deputy Secretary General at the organization of the Islamic Conference. Thank you all for being with us. I'll start this webinar with one single question to you all, and take some time to answer it, but try to be brief. This question is very simply a retrospective reflection on what has been the significance of October 7. And the question is, from your point of view, from your angle, how do you characterize October 7? What do you make out of it? How today, after 1 year, you understand this event? What can we say retrospectively about October 7? Marwan, I would start with you.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure and an honor to be among such a distinguished group. To me, October 7 was an eye-opener in that it showed the whole world that it cannot afford to avoid the Arab-Israeli conflict or ignore it. Joe, you referred to Jake Sullivan's statement a week or two before, and indeed, the last time negotiations took place over a peaceful settlement were 10 years ago with John Kerry. So the world has indeed ignored the conflict for a long time, and October 7 came to show the world that that cannot remain. The question is it a game changer? And to me, the answer is so far no. In other words, earlier crises in the Middle East have led to political breakthroughs. The October 73 war led to peace between Egypt and Israel. The first Gulf War led to the Madrid peace process. Today, there is no sort of horizon. There is no hope for any party putting on the table a serious political initiative. You know, we might see political initiatives, but in my view, unless they address the core issue, which is the occupation and the need to end it, is there a party today, whether it is the United States, whether it is the Arab world, whether it is Israel, is there a party that is ready and willing today to put on the table as a result of October 7 a serious political initiative whose end is, or whose objective is to end the occupation? I don't think so. And therefore, you know, my solemn prediction is that this conflict is going to stay with us for a while, and violence is going to stay with us, with losses, of course, on both sides for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you, Marwan. I think you put on the table something very important, which is a bit counterintuitive, but then you maybe explained it a little bit, that this is not a game changer, but not because of what we think, but because there's no initiative to take it from there towards a sort of political horizon. We'll come back to that. Dr. Hitti, your take on what October 7 has meant.
Look, it brought back the Palestinian issue to the front burner of regional parties, and particularly the international parties of the region. I would agree with Marwan that doesn't mean it's going to change and shift into moving on with the peace process most needed, regardless of how we could define this peace process. But it's to suggest You cannot disregard forever for numerous reasons, some regional reasons, some priorities, eminent priorities, this issue. So if the first year, let me say, if the first year was the year of Gaza, and this will indicate what I'm going to say, how important the issue is anchored in the region, in regional politics. The second year is Lebanon's year in terms of fighting, in terms of what's going on. So it's high time. I don't expect really, I haven't seen any serious attempt at developing a serious, genuine approach to address the core of the issue, which is Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory. As we say in French. Nothing is being done. We're just kicking the can. We're in the process of kicking the can, buying time. We discuss for days and months how we could have a ceasefire, a 21-day ceasefire, a 1-week ceasefire, what we call a sort of truce, but not seriously. There is really no attention, actually, particularly from Western powers, particularly from the US, to put an end, to stop the fighting and do something. So we're still in that kind of situation that's getting much more difficult to handle over time with no really serious, genuine perspective of taking the road of peace as we would understand peace, starting again and again with ending occupation.
Thank you, Dr. Hittis. So I think of course, we all agree that it brought the Palestinian issue or question back to the forefront. But I think where you concur with Dr. Mashar is that it brings it back to the forefront, but without bringing any solution to it and without opening any perspective. Dr. Hisham Youssef, Dr. Youssef, what is your take on October 7, retrospectively and then on?
Well, first, I have to thank you for giving me a PhD that I didn't get. So I'm very happy to be a doctor, at least for this event. But let me push back a little bit on what was mentioned regarding whether it's a game changer or not. I agree with both Marwan and Nassif that there is no political horizon. But at the same time, I think it is a game changer because there is no going back to the pre-status quo of the 6th of October. The vast majority of the wars that took place since Hamas took over Gaza, 2008, 2009, 12, 14, 21, 23, except 23, all the effort was to bring the situation back to the status quo ante. Now, going back to the status quo ante is not possible. So this is why, from my perspective, I think it is a game changer. It is also a game changer because it provided Israel with an opportunity to liquidate the Palestinian question altogether. So it found an opportunity as a result of the 7th of October to say, well, this is the end of the conflict. And we will do that through forced mass displacement to Egypt in as far as Gaza is concerned and to Jordan in as far as the West Bank is concerned. And there has been a lot of diplomatic effort that prevented this until this moment. But this doesn't mean that the strategic objectives of Israel has changed. It hasn't. And probably they will try to achieve the same objective through making the situation in Gaza and probably also the West Bank unlivable. And that is, a crucial point that we need to discuss. Finally, in relation to the US, I think also one of the things that changed for the US and for others as well is that it proved that the status quo is extremely unstable and that it cannot be sustained. In the last few years, while I was in Washington, the feeling was, no, the status quo can be maintained. And we will work with firefighting diplomacy. So whenever there is a war, we'll go and stop it, and then things will go back until the situation is ripe for a political horizon to evolve. I think what happened since the 7th of October indicated that, no, this is no longer the case. Something has to take place that is much more fundamental. Whether this would lead to progress on the political front or not, that remains to be seen, and perhaps we can discuss it in further details in this event.
Thank you, Hisham. Thank you very much, because I think what you said is interesting for our discussion, because you, in fact, in a way, toppled things upside down by saying that it's no more time for conflict management by the US of the conflict. It's time for conflict solution. However, and you said it, and this is why it's interesting, the way Israel is solving the problem is by dissolving it, by completely putting it away, blowing it away. And I think we'll come back to that. This is the perfect transition to my first question to Dr. Masher on the Jordanian, let's say, angle. Marwan, you know that it's been months now that we are waiting or expecting or trying to see if things will not let's say, transfer to the West Bank. If what is happening in Gaza not exactly turn to turn, but if something will not start brewing in the West Bank, and then, and here I take Hisham Yousef's hypothesis, if there is an idea in Israel or in Netanyahu's mind of a transfer of the Palestinians and of liquidating the Palestinian question by changing the demographics. First of all, are you foreseeing or perceiving signs of unrest in the West Bank? And corollary, I mean, by extension, how will this reverberate on the Kingdom of Jordan? How anxious is Jordan that this is going to happen in the coming months or years?
Joe, in my view, October 7 has only exposed what Israel's strategy has always been the case. It did not start with October 7. What October 7 did is expose the Israeli strategy, and the Israeli strategy is mass transfer. If we look at it from an Israeli point of view, Israel today has made it very clear that it does not intend to end the occupation and does not intend to establish a Palestinian state. Netanyahu called a Palestinian state a reward for terrorism. If Israel does not want a Palestinian state, and if it also does not want a Palestinian majority in areas under its control, because today, as of 2017, 2018, the number of Palestinians living in areas under Israel's control, so that is Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, is greater than the number of Israeli Jews. So the demographic factor is now kicking in a way it did not before. If Israel does not want a Palestinian state or a Palestinian majority, the only alternative it has is mass transfer. And mass transfer can take, several forms. It can be a soft transfer, it can be a hard transfer, it can be what Israel is doing in the West Bank today, ethnic cleansing, it can be making life in Gaza uninhabitable. There are many ways in which you can affect mass transfer. How does this affect Jordan? Jordan has always been concerned with the issue that then the Israeli people on the fringe of the Israeli political system used to promote, that Jordan is Palestine, that there is a Palestinian state and it exists in Jordan. Today, those people that were 40 years ago on the fringe are right and center in the Israeli political system. They are in government. And with what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in the West Bank also, the official Jordanian argument for a long time, since we signed the peace treaty, which was used to justify signing a peace treaty to the Jordanian population, and which said that by signing a peace treaty, Jordan's borders are protected, we are preventing mass transfer, and that the idea that Jordan is Palestine is buried forever. Now that argument has been severely weakened. Today it is becoming clear not only to popular Jordan, but to official Jordan, that by signing a peace treaty, that did not prevent the issue of Jordan is Palestine or the issue of mass transfer. And this is where the Jordanian concern is today. If I can just say one more thing, Joe.
Please.
Like Hisham said, and I agree with him, there is no going back to pre-October 7. That doesn't apply to the Palestinians only. It applies to the Jordanians. Jordan can no longer justify, even to itself, maintaining strong economic security coordination with Israel after October 7th. The latest Jordanian elections proved the point. You know, the Muslim Brotherhood won 22% of parliament seat in an election law that is designed to limit their presence in parliament, and yet they got 22%. So public mood is very general, and if Jordan is to resume any kind of security or economic relations with Israel after the war, it's going to face a very, very angry public.
Okay, Marwan, what you said is extremely worrying, tragic, and grave. I mean, it means in a way or another that the entire peace process, let's say, the way we knew it since Camp David to today, is now being, if not killed or obliterated, but at least reversed by Israel. And this is a huge paradigm shift in the region. It gives a high disincentive, I would say, to any other country in the region to embark on a peace process with Israel. This is extremely important.
Why did Arab states go to Madrid in the first place? It is true that they had, you know, the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Jordanians had, you know, their bilateral issues with Israel. But the main reason Arab states went to Madrid is to create a Palestinian state, is to end the Israeli occupation and create a Palestinian state. Jordan did not go to Madrid to recover some of its water rights or some of its territory that was, you know, taken by Israel. Jordan went to Madrid to help establish a Palestinian state and bury the argument, as I said before. Today, Arab states need to ask themselves, if Israel is saying a Palestinian state is a reward for terrorism, what is the meaning of peace with Israel? If it is not the end of the occupation and the establishment of a Palestinian state. This is what October 7 is going to force people at the official level. This is what October 7 is going to force people to ponder, because the whole basis behind which we went to Madrid and started this peace process 30 years ago, the whole basis for this, the whole foundation is now undermined with Israeli actions. And yes, Israel is going to try, as they say, to reshape the Middle East, okay? You know, what Israel is succeeding in doing in reshaping the Middle East is to radicalize the Middle East to a state where no one wants peace anymore. Today, 65% of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza think that the only way to end the occupation is through armed resistance. This is what Israel has succeeded to do, rather than what in their view is a more domesticated Middle East. That's not going to happen.
Okay, this is enormous, because this leads us maybe in a minute in our discussion to the question about post Gaza. I mean, post Gaza diplomacy, the normalization with the Gulf states. What is the place of Israel in the region? How will it integrate in the region or not? These are huge questions. Dr. Hisham, maybe I'll take the same question to you, because Egypt is in the same situation. Egypt was the first country to sign a peace treaty, Camp David. Today, obviously, what Dr. Masher is saying could apply to Egypt, if not in the same magnitude, but also with a deep revision of the security political arrangements between both countries. We see it on the Philadelphia corridor and on all things related to Rafah and etc., and to the future of the Gaza enclave. Can you say today, in the light of all this, that Camp David is maybe in danger, or is it being reversed by Israel at least?
Well, that's a very loaded and complicated question. Because there are elements of yes and no. Israel has always been complaining that the peace with Egypt is cold peace. And they've been doing that for the last 45 years. And I've been telling them for the last 40 years that it will continue to be cold peace until we have a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, this cold peace, I think, is being slightly transformed into a Cold War of sorts. The situation in the relations between Egypt and Israel is at the worst since the signing of the peace agreement. Tensions are very high and on all kinds of fronts. You mentioned some of them. Rafah is one of them. So Israel decided that it doesn't want Rafah in the place where it is in. So Egypt said no. So they said, so what did they do? They flattened the Palestinian side of the border with the ground. So Egypt continued to say no. This is an Egyptian-Palestinian issue, and we will keep the border where it has been. The question of Philadelphia. Philadelphia was controlled by Israel after signing the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. So from 1979 until the disengagement by Sharon in 2005, Israel was controlling Philadelphia corridor. But the situation has changed. So as far as Egypt is concerned, this is a political problem because it returns back to the situation that prevailed before the disengagement. Not that the disengagement was successful or that it was done in a proper way in consultations with the Palestinians and so on. No, it was done unilaterally, and this was part of the problem and so on. Then there comes another level of the problem that is even maybe more disturbing than all others. That the attack in Gaza this time around violated the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty because there are limits as to the number of forces that Israel is allowed to have in Area D, because there are areas A, B, and C, just like in the West Bank, but in Egypt, in Sinai, where there are limitations on troops and military equipment and so on. And there is an Area D on the Egyptian-Israeli border and in the border with Gaza. And if you go to the security annex of the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty, Rafah could not have taken place, the whole of the Rafah governorate could not have taken place without violating these limitations. Having said all that, Egypt still has not indicated in any way that the peace treaty is threatened. On the contrary, Jordan did. So Jordan said that forced mass displacement will be a declaration of war, meaning that this would end the current situation between Israel and Jordan. Egypt did not do that. Does this mean that Egypt is not worried? Of course not. It is extremely worried. And mind you, there were also some tensions between Egyptians soldiers on the border and Israeli soldiers. Yes, there were incidents that were personal and not through instructions, but it is a reflection of the level of tension between Israel and Egypt, despite the fact that the war is on Gaza because of the sentiment of Egyptians in relation to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So this is why the situation is extremely tense, and it is not clear how it will be resolved. And Egypt has closed the Rafah crossing, and I don't think that there is any prospect for it to open again anytime soon because the Rafah crossing, the problem of the Rafah crossing now between Egypt and Israel is the microcosm of the whole problem of Gaza, because it has security dimensions, it has Palestinian Authority dimensions and responsibilities, it has governance responsibilities, and so on. So the situation between Egypt and Israel has become very complicated, and I think it will continue to be as such for quite some time to come, including in relation to the post-war Gaza and how it would be governed and how security would be dealt with in this period.
Okay, thank you, Hisham. Just a note, I received a WhatsApp message from Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. He's here. He's listening to us, but I don't know why he can't connect, at least by sound. Dr. Mustafa, if you are hearing me, I think you have to connect on the link that I just sent you on WhatsApp, which is the speaker's link. And if you can connect to us by sound, that would be fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Mustafa.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Yeah,
Thank you very
connected.
much, Dr. Mustafa. Yeah. Nassif, if you allow me, just I'll get back to you, but let me just first of all welcome Dr. Barghouti, and then also maybe catch up with the few questions we had with him. Do you mind that? Or I'm very sorry. Dr. Mustafa, are you hearing me?
Yes, I do hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I started this webinar with a single question to all the speakers, and I want to put it up to you now. You are the main one concerned here because you're the Palestinian voice. The question is, 1 year later, what is your description, your characterization, your understanding of what October 7 has meant and has been?
Well, it's very important to mention. I'm sorry I can't be with you fully because I'm still in the airport, but it is very important to remember that the 7th of October was a result, not a cause. And it was a result of 76 years of ethnic cleansing, 76 years of ethnic cleansing and 57 years of occupation and a system of apartheid and a terrible siege on Gaza. And more than that, it was a result of the Israeli declaration that they are killing all the hopes for any possible peaceful future or any peaceful resolution. They were annexing the West Bank gradually. They were attacking even the holy places in Jerusalem. And they were, especially the Aqsa Mosque, and they were declaring clearly that they are in the process of liquidating the Palestinian cause through normalization with Arab countries. More than that, just 2 weeks before the 7th of October, Netanyahu stood up in the United Nations General Assembly and challenged everybody by showing the map of Israel, annexing all of the West Bank, all of Gaza Strip, all of East Jerusalem, and of course the Golan Heights. And that was based on also a previous resolution by the Israeli parliament, for which not only the government but opposition also voted that the Palestine is a place where self-determination is going to be exclusive for Jewish people. The last act that killed any possibility of avoiding the 7th of October was the cancellation of Palestinian democratic elections in 2021. Had we have the
Can you hear us? Dr. Mustafa? Dr. Mustafa, you have been cut off.
these elections.
Dr. Mustafa, your sound is disappearing. Can you hear me? Hello? Dr. Barghouti, can you hear us?
Because neither Hamas nor anybody else expected that the largest second military brigade in Israel, the Gaza brigade, will collapse in 2.5 hours. So many things like taking some civilians hostages or prisoners was not planned, but it happened. And then you've seen the Israeli reaction. Since the 7th of October, Israel conducted 3 terrible war crimes, unprecedented war crimes in modern history in parallel.
Okay. Dr. Barghouti, I will come back to you in a minute if you can fix the sound. Already what I'm keeping in mind from what you said is that okay, let me shift to Nassif for a while and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Mustafa. Dr. Hitti, in the line of the questions I was asking on each country surrounding the conflict, the Lebanese front has started on October 8 as a support front. Okay, today it's becoming the main theater of war, becoming the main theater of operations. What can you say today after these 10 months and more, and especially after what we have lived in Beirut the last 2 months? I mean, the almost decapitation of Hezbollah's command structure, and today the start of a ground offensive in the south. How can you see, or how can you understand what are exactly the aims of war of Israel in Lebanon?
Well, let me say first, just to go back to what my two good friends have mentioned. One general remark I always made about the Arab policies in general is what I call the diplomacy of schizophrenia. Collectively, we adopt resolutions, but practically we do nothing about these resolutions. It's like somebody shooting himself or herself in the foot. This is why we never moved on with a serious peace process. Today, you are in the logic of really managing the crisis, as I mentioned before, like kicking the can, which is taking you nowhere. It's investing in a more complex and complicated crisis to come, and also it's consolidating the essence of the conflict. It's consolidating the essence of the conflict, rendering much more difficult. Today, with the Israeli government in power, like the current one, with the large support, it's what I call the sacralization of the conflict, inviting God in the conflict, talking about these matters. This is why I consider the basic aim of Israel, and I'm sure my two good friends would agree with me, is the West Bank. How to finish with annexing the West Bank. Policies that remain untouchable by the Western countries, and even critical by the Western countries, of the de-Palestinization, demographic and geographic de-Palestinization of the West Bank is a very dangerous, was and still a very dangerous policy. Lebanon is a security strategic issue, like to a certain extent Gaza is. This is my first comment. So basically, if you want to go back to the peace process, we have to really put power behind any political idea that we need to advance. All of us remember the Beirut summit, the Arab Peace Initiative, and what happened there. We can discuss hours about what I like to keep calling, unfortunately, at my great distress and anger, the diplomacy of schizophrenia. Nothing would be done. Currently, Israel is trying to change beyond even its normal frontiers of 48. It's trying to change the situation, not in the occupied territories, to build its own, Netanyahu would say it every day, a new regional order. I think it's investing in more disorder, profiting to anybody who would like to serve his or her interests in this respect. To go back to Lebanon, as you say, Lebanon was always, and it's Lebanese responsibility, you know, and I know, and all of us know, has always been in a way the mailbox, the theater of confrontation by proxies for years, the only one open. Today, Lebanon, because of its importance, the difference between Lebanon and Gaza, from a military perspective, Lebanon has a very strong strategic profondeur, as we say, dimension, very strong, important one, going up to the Arab world, into Iran, which is not the case of Gaza, so on and so to speak. The theory, the new doctrine of unity of the fronts is contrary, all of us would remember, entirely contrary to 2006, when the late leader of Hezbollah said, if I knew about the act against Israel when the Hezbollah tried to take hostages to Israeli soldiers, that the rules of the game have changed. We have to remember post-2000 rules of engagement, rules of the game was something. Post-2000, after liberation, became something else. And Hezbollah accepted that in 2006 when he said we played beyond the rules. Now, these are new rules. From the 8th of October, last year, 8th of October, we are saying unity of fronts. In practical terms, it's Lebanese front being the only active one. This is a strategic transformation for reasons beyond Lebanon, putting feelings aside and putting our commitment, my commitment personally as a Lebanese, as an Arab, to Palestinian cause. This is a very strategic, important strategic change with devastating impact on Lebanon, regardless of how the war would end. And I'm not seeing that the war is ending. My view, unfortunately, from day one, and your witness, we discussed that over almost a year ago, that we're going to go into guerre d'usure, I said, a war of attrition, a long war of attrition, particularly in Lebanon. It's not going to stop. And that's extremely dangerous, particularly to a country which is already almost failing or a failed state. This is why I'm not particularly optimistic about what we can do. We should start. I think those who are concerned actors, concerned powers, should start by a ceasefire in Lebanon, Lebanese-Israeli front and ceasefire in Gaza. But I think we're very far away from that. What we're hearing is about, as I said before, Hudna, a truce here and a truce there, and nothing is being said about the situation in Lebanon when the country is breaking down in fact.
Nassif, let me follow up with another question and refine a little bit to get into more details of today's conundrum with Lebanon. The question that is today in Beirut asked, Dr. Mustafa, please, I'll come back to you. Can you mute for 1 second? Thank you. Dr. Nassif, the question that is today haunting Lebanon, I mean, the political level and other levels also, very simply, is 1701 still a format that is workable? Is it still on the table? Yesterday, just to give you the mood, yesterday I was listening to former US Deputy Secretary of State, David Hale, on TV. And he was saying, look, let's be lucid and clear and realistic. 1701 is no more on the table. 1701 cannot answer anymore the type of challenges that are today between Lebanon and Israel, or Hezbollah and Israel. What's your take on that? You have been Minister of Foreign Affairs. You know this very well. You have accompanied 1701 in its inception. What do you make of it today?
1701 was never implemented from day one. There was a sort of modus operandi. We apply it, we used to say diplomatically, on the two sides of the frontiers. Each time somebody would say it here or there. It's a way of surviving, of managing the situation when the real actors are not the official actors in a certain situation. So it was a sort of modus operandi or modus vivendi, the two compete each other, used in a way. The issue is not finding a new resolution. The issue is reaching the possibility of having serious truth on the borders, ceasefire, entire ceasefire on the borders. The blue line, what we call the blue line, is not the borders of Lebanon. The line of Hudna, the armistice agreement line, which is the borders of Lebanon, between Lebanon and Palestine at the time, is the line. And we have to stop there and say it's temporary, and negotiate on to go to the frontiers, Lebanese frontiers. But we're very far away from that. What is necessary today, before tomorrow, is to have a ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire. That's very important, and to start talking from there how we could implement 1701. Over 35 to 40,000, some would say, Israeli overflying Lebanon since 1701 was created in 2006, August 2006, has been occurring. It has been also registered at the end. Nothing has been done. Of course, there was a violation on our side, but that's the situation. And as we all know in this debate, the Lebanese state is extremely weak, So if we want to find pretext, we could get all the pretext we need. This is why, and I will end up here on this point, we don't need to wait. We cannot wait till there is a ceasefire. We have to put the house in order. We cannot stay with a vacuum at the top of power. Neither a president nor a functional constitutional government. It's a caretaker government. We need to address these issues and not wait for that matter, because this is extremely important, the day that will come where we have to negotiate directly or in a multilateral way.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hattit. Dr. Mustafa, I'm coming back to you now, if you can hear me. Dr. Barghouti, can you unmute? Nassif, if you can mute, and Dr. Mashir also, just for the technical easiness. Lala, don't disappear from the screen, just mute. Dr. Barghouti, please, can you hear me? I'm coming back to you with the round of questions I have on your, let's say, on your situation as Palestinians. Hisham Youssef was saying something extremely important a while ago, a minute ago. He was saying that ultimately one of the results of October 7 has been to completely liquidate the Palestinian question while putting it on the forefront. And this is a very interesting paradox. The aim was to bring back the Palestinian question on the forefront. However, Netanyahu is now liquidating it. From your point of view as a Palestinian political actor, and we know how persistent you have been in the last decades and a half in the Palestinian scene, what are today the parameters of, or the remaining parameters of a Palestinian question, if it has to be put on the table of a diplomatic solution? And then how did the events of last year transform the relations between the Palestinian actors themselves? And is there a consensus today on the roadmap towards a sort of negotiated solution for Palestine?
Well, I think Netanyahu would love to hear that the Palestinian question is totally liquidated, because this is his main goal. But the reality is, in my opinion, is that the Palestinian question is never so alive as it is today, regardless of the whole suffering that we are going through. The most important thing here for everybody to understand is that Israel's aggression, not only on Palestine, but also on Lebanon, and even the regional war it is trying to create, was going to happen anyway. It's not because of what Palestinians did. The Palestinians did what they did because of what Israel was doing. And in my opinion, the Palestinian question is not getting liquidated, but it is what is getting liquidated 100%, and I agree 100%, is the Oslo process. What has been liquidated is the two illusions. One illusion about the possibility of a negotiated settlement with the Zionist establishment, and the possibility of implementing Oslo agreement. Oslo is finished. It's dead. It's been dead since 2014. Now Netanyahu has eliminated it completely. And the big question for Palestinian people and for Palestinian leaders is what strategy they have to choose.
Yeah, exactly. This is my question. This is my main question.
Yeah, the old strategy of having two illusions, of a negotiation and a possibility of a compromise with the Zionist movement in its structure today, which has become fascist, not only aggressive, not only building a system of apartheid, but it has transformed into a system of fascism. Having a negotiated agreement and a solution or a compromise with this establishment is impossible now without changing the balance of power. And second illusion was that the United States of America could be a mediator between Palestinians and Israelis, or between Arabs and Israel. The United States of America is a partner with Israel in this terrible aggression. It's a partner with Israel in committing the war crimes, including the genocide that Palestinians are subjected to. There is no way that you can think of the United States as a mediator. And if you need an additional proof, it is what we have seen during the talks about ceasefire. United States was only a cover for Israel at each step. Now, what should be the future for Palestinians? I think we have no alternative to a unified Palestinian leadership that should gather its power, gather its forces around a strategy of struggling against this injustice and against occupation and against the system of apartheid and against these terrible war crimes that are happening. In other words, we are not at a stage of a solution. We are in a stage of freedom, struggle of the liberation Palestinian movement. Many Palestinian leaders have to change their approach, especially the Palestinian Authority, which is still hoping to go back to what is dead and what is finished. That's the reality of how I see it.
I hear you well, Dr. Mustafa. My question will be more precise, maybe. Do you mean, and I think that we agree on that today we have to reshape the Palestinian Authority or the PLO or something like that, agree on a new agenda, on a new roadmap with new actors, with new figures, taking into consideration the new balance of power inside the Palestinian scene between Palestine and Israel, but also with, as you said, the drifting of the US from a potential mediator or a would-be mediator to a sidelined actor. Is this what you are saying, and is it undertaken now?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. What we need is not to reshape the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority should be only a technical structure. What needs to be reshaped is the PLO on democratic basis so that it can be the house of a unified Palestinian leadership that includes everybody. And it is important to emphasize that because what we need is not only to struggle, but to prevent Netanyahu's effort and some regional countries' effort to take away from Palestinians their right of self-representation. That was achieved with great amount of struggle. All these talks about creating some sort of a local authority in Gaza that works as a collaborating structure with Israel, with the help of some Arab countries, is totally unacceptable because it means killing the very right of the Palestinian people of self-determination and the unity between West Bank and Gaza. So what we need is to reshape the PLO around a new program, which should understand that our goal is not only to end occupation. Our goal is not only to end the system of apartheid, but to stand up and to prevent the settler colonial project from going on in the West Bank and Gaza. In reality, what most Palestinians have discovered is that what we face is not just occupation. What we face is the same settler colonial project that created Israel in 1948 through ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, through the destruction and elimination of 520 Palestinian communities. The same scenario is repeating now, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. And one more thing, I've never seen a whole young generation in Palestine, whether in Palestine or outside Palestine, re-energized and regenerated as it is happening today. That's why all those who think that the Palestinian cause can be eliminated are absolutely wrong.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mustafa. Now, of course, before we get there, before we get to this new reshuffling of the Palestinian, let's say, landscape, the PLO, etc., we're now in the midst of a crazy war, and this will be now my next round of question. My question is simple. I mean, the question is simple. The answer is definitely not. Are we in for a long haul of regional confrontation that is widening in concentric circles? Gaza is now almost finished off. We have moved to Lebanon, maybe tomorrow to Syria, Iran, etc. Is this a scenario that you foresee? And in that respect, the question that is looming about Netanyahu's maybe aims, foolish aims of reshaping the region, a little bit like the neoconservatives wanted to reshape it in 2003. Is it something that we have to take seriously, or is it purely rhetorical? And here my second question is, how to understand the enigmatic Iranian position? I mean, is Iran sort of gradually accepting defeat, or is it preparing a comeback, and what would be the form of this comeback? Let me start with you, Dr. Marwan. You're muted, Marwan. You're muted.
We have seen such claims by Israel before of reshaping the region. We all remember what Shimon Peres said in the 90s about a new Middle East. I find it really absurd for a country that is not out of this region, culturally, ethnically, or otherwise, to come and claim that it can reshape the Middle East along lines that it prefers. It simply is not going to happen. Israel is inferior culturally in the region. It is not going to be able to reshape the Middle East in its in the shape that it prefers. What it has done, as I said, it has radicalized the Middle East to a point where people no longer believe that, as Dr. Mustafa said, that a negotiated settlement is going to lead anywhere. And I think what we are in for is, yes, a protracted period of violence and conflict between Palestinians and Israelis, between the Lebanese and Israelis. I'm not so sure, Joe, that we are yet talking about a protracted regional war. I still think that neither the United States nor Iran wants such a regional war. And yes, things have gone out of hand, but I'm not sure that it is going to, it's too early. Um, uh, it's premature to talk about a protracted regional war, which is in nobody's interest but that of Israel. In my own view, what we are going to witness is a protracted period of violence until two things happen. And actually, two things are happening as we speak. These factors are kicking in, and these are factors that are in favor of the Palestinian cause. The first is the demographic factor. Look, as I said, the Palestinians today are larger in number than the Israelis. Israelis are not going to push 7 million Palestinians out. They simply will not be able to do that. And in the end, if it becomes clear, if it is not already, that a two-state solution is no longer possible, I'm one of the people who believe that, Israel cannot maintain an apartheid system indefinitely, where a minority rules over a majority in what is legally, technically, an apartheid system, not just emotionally. And the other factor that is kicking in is the generational gap, not just in this region, but around the world. It is clear that the younger you are in age, the more likely you are to support the Palestinian cause. Not because the new generation worldwide understands the intricacies and details of the Palestinian issue, but because they do understand the issue of rights, and they do not accept people under occupation in a situation where they do not enjoy equal rights. These two factors are becoming more and more important as we speak. It does not mean that we're going to reach an end to the conflict soon. That is still, far away. But it does mean, in my view, that in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time, the factors are going to be positive for the Palestinian cause.
What's your name? No, what's your name?
You're on mute, Nasif. Joseph. Joseph, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, Nasif, Marwan, I was saying that what you say here at your last point is extremely important. We'll try to devote a few minutes to it maybe at the end, but the shift in the Western, let's say, societal mood is something that has to be integrated in the conflict. Nasif, I would like to come back to you and put the same question, but with a Lebanese angle by going back to history. In 1982, the Israeli invasion in Lebanon was a sort of regime change attempt. I mean, it toppled the PLO, it expelled it from Lebanon, but it did not stop there. It was accompanied by a political project. I mean, whatever we think of it. Today, is there something similar in sight? I mean, do you think that when you listen to some declarations, some statements from Israeli officials, you can take a hint that actually what they want is not a new security arrangement only with Lebanon, but maybe a new Lebanese reality reshaped by them, although they took some very harsh lessons from the 82 from the 82 experience. But what do you make of that? And are you afraid of that? You're muted, Nasif. Nasif, you're muted.
Okay, now it's fine. Okay. The Israelis are putting the bar very high, as we say, in terms of what they want to achieve in Lebanon. And I think it's not achievable. I'm not saying this because I'm Lebanese. One thing is sure, however, we will not get back to the situation that existed up to the 7th of October 2023. There must be new forms of arrangements. Who will be at the facade of this arrangement is one thing, and who will accept these arrangements, because also there are major changes occurring within the domestic balance of power in Lebanon, not to the effect of as some would wish, eliminating this actor or that Lebanese actor. But we are in a very unstable in terms of balance of power situation in Lebanon. This is why some people would say, let's wait until some faction, let's wait until there is a ceasefire. When the ceasefire comes, if it comes, and then we'll go back to put the house in order, elect a president and form a new government. Others would say, and I believe we shouldn't wait because we cannot afford to wait. Of course, changes will be occurring. I wouldn't, to go back to what my friend Marwan was saying, there is no war at the regional level in terms of state-to-state war. But what we are seeing is asymmetrical wars occurring via allies of Iran within what we call the unity of the fronts. It's not that effective whether coming from Iraq, from Iraqis, or from Yemenis. I wouldn't exclude a sort of limited attack, what we call strategic targeting on the Israeli side against some Iranian side. But let's face it, I mean, the Iranians are, chess players, and they act very well as strategic people. They want to negotiate. They want to put back on the table JCPOA. They want to revive the JCPOA. They want to show that they are dealing differently, perhaps, with the West. Let's remember one important matter that occurred in the region: a normalization of what was left of the Arabs having problems with Iranians and key Arab actors with Iran. These are major changes. But having said so, doesn't mean that these Arab actors, these Arab powers, would accept to allow Iran to dictate its policy in the Middle East, because there is a view widely really taken into consideration and adopted by many that Iran is trying to implement itself via this going war in southern Lebanon, particularly as a key power on the Mediterranean region via Lebanon. Some would interpret it this way: Iran is a key actor via its Hezbollah ally. So we are in this very transitional period, open for all kinds of changes. But I would discard myself a classical regional war, and I think more about what I call that kind of, protracted civil war in a way, but protracted conflict also going on. It's very heating up in Lebanon, as you know, not that people against people, but the situation is dramatic. It's already economically, as we all know, all our friends know, with the social repercussions. I can tell you hours about that situation. The middle class broke down in the last 7 years. We took the descenseur social, as we said once, and this situation is extremely vulnerable, extremely attractive for all kinds of tension and all kinds of, attempt by this power or that power to use at different ends.
Yes, thank you, Nassif. I can attest, being in Lebanon now, I can attest that the pressure cooker is heating every minute, socially and politically and mentally and psychologically also. Hisham, if I may turn to you on this question, you've spent maybe the last 3-4 years in Washington, D.C. at the United States Institute for Peace. When we talk about this issue, Nassif Hitti was mentioning, Iran wanting to go back to the JCPOA, wanting to remain, let's say, at a lower bar of the conflictuality in the region in order to attain its goal, etc. Is this view in Washington still valid, or has Washington espoused once again in various forms the idea that you have to get rid of this sort of Iranian threat in the region? And if so, is it giving a full cover to Netanyahu's adventure in the region? What is the mood in DC? What can you tell us about it?
Well, I think Marwan said it, that there is no interest in the US or in Iran to have a full-fledged war in the region. And I think that this is the case. But at the same time, I have to admit that neither the region nor the US has any strategy to deal with Iran. So Iran is being dealt with in a piecemeal basis, whether in the region or in the US. The US, we had an administration, the Biden administration. When the Biden administration came to office, they decided that they don't want to deal with anything in the Middle East except one file, which is the nuclear file. And they worked on it for the first 2 years, and then they failed. And after they failed, they started working on another file. They said, okay, we'll work on one other file, which is the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So I don't think that there is a view as to how the US wants to deal with Iran, and this will have to await the new administration. But this also applies to other issues as well. So in relation to how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will be dealt with, will have to await the new administration. And it is not clear because if there is some continuity, then we had the continuity of the Biden administration that was totally uninterested in dealing with the Middle East because it is too problematic and the cost is very high and the return is very low, and we can't deal with Netanyahu in a manner that would allow progress to be achieved. Will this continue to be the position of the new administration? It is not clear. So we will have to wait and see. And then, of course, if Trump is elected, that's a totally different ballgame because no one can predict how he intends to deal with this issue if he becomes president. But the indications that we had is that he moved the embassy to Jerusalem and he presented a plan that he thought was a peace plan. So the situation doesn't augur well in as far as how the US would work on this issue. And I want to come to the issue of the reshaping the Middle East as it is linked also to the US. Netanyahu says that he wants to reshape the Middle East. He is not on speaking terms with any leader in the region. And he wants to reshape the Middle East on his own for his interest, and the rest of the region would be spectators watching him and saying, okay, we will go in your way. So I think it is really ridiculous. And it's a slogan for internal use and so on. So I really don't take this seriously at all. But the danger is, despite what I mentioned, that the US and Iran do not want this to become a regional war, it can slide into any mistake, either by Israel or by Iran, or even by Hezbollah, can result in a vicious circle that would reach a regional war. And as a matter of fact, it is also clear that Netanyahu wants to implicate the US in a war against Iran. And the US is being careful, and Iran is being careful because they don't want to be dragged into a situation like this at this point in time. So we will see. But final point in relation to whether this would continue to the long haul. Well, the longest war that took place since Hamas took over Gaza was 51 days. And it was catastrophic at the time. Now we are passing the 1-year mark. And we don't have any prospects for a ceasefire. So even the negotiations in relation to the ceasefire are no longer going on. And then there were ideas for a ceasefire on the Lebanese front. And Netanyahu, after agreeing to the Biden administration, said this was misunderstanding. And it is not clear whether this would be resumed or not, or how, but the situation is quite bleak.
Yeah, thank you, Hisham. Marwan, on this last point, now I want to focus a little bit on the American position. Marwan, you have been ambassador to Washington. You live half of the year or part of your time in DC because of your position at Carnegie. You know the administration very well. You know American politics. There is a question that, I mean, really haunts also us in the region here. Do the US want this to remain contained and they cannot, or ultimately they want it to continue but pretend that they are that they are trying to stop it? This is one question. The second question is that, okay, we have 3-4 months before a new administration, whatever it is installed in Washington. Within this period, Netanyahu is trying to accomplish as much as he can in terms of fait accompli. I mean, changing the reality on the ground, and any new coming administration in Washington will have to deal with it. So how do you understand Washington's, let's say, dealing of this and the management of this war that can put Washington in front of choices and options ultimately Washington doesn't want?
First of all, Joe, I don't think the Biden administration was ever serious about stopping the war in Gaza. Because as we have seen, I mean, it is a very absurd position to have, to call for a ceasefire on one hand, and on the other hand, to keep giving arms to Israel. That doesn't work. So obviously, I think the Americans and the Israelis differed over tactics only, but not over the overall objective. of trying to, finish Hamas off. That's the first point. The second point is Netanyahu himself does not intend to stop the war, at least until the US elections, because Netanyahu is riding high in Israeli polls today after what he has done to Gaza and Lebanon. Today, most Israelis don't think that what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza and Lebanon is enough. That is the degree to which Israeli society has been radicalized. So Netanyahu basically is not listening to whatever pressure is being exerted on him. One, because it is in his own interest to prolong the war so that he is not faced with the corruption issues that await him. But two, because he does not want to give a gift to the Biden, to the Harris, to the Democrats. He is still hoping that that Trump will win, and therefore any stopping of the war today might be used by the Democrats as, having been the case because of their intervention. And Netanyahu has no intention to do that. So I'm very pessimistic about stopping the war now. And I say at least until the elections. That doesn't mean that the conflict or the war will stop after the elections. But at least until then, Netanyahu has no intention to stop the war. The problem beyond that, Joe, and here let us assume that Harris wins, because if Trump wins, as Hisham said, it's a totally different ballgame. Nobody can predict. But even if Harris wins, does that mean that Harris is ready, after she is president, to put on the table a political initiative that ends the occupation? Because that's the only serious initiative. Otherwise, it's not serious. I don't think so. And so the Americans, the Biden administration has focused all its efforts in the last 4 years on normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, thinking that it is possible. And the Saudis quickly found out that it is not possible to have such an agreement in the presence of the occupation and what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. The question today is Harris going to keep that focus on Saudi normalization in the presence of the aftermath of October 7? Or are they going to move and be more serious and suggest something that, as I said, leads to the end of the occupation? I'm not optimistic that they're going to do so. The Americans keep saying that the time is not ripe today for negotiations based on two states. And therefore, all we need to do, they say, is to wait until the conditions are better. And then we can resume negotiations. But if the conditions are not, ideal today, what makes you think, what makes them think that in 5 or 10 years' time, they're going to be, more positive, when settlements are not stopped, when today you have 750,000 settlers, you might get more than 1 million in 5 years. What gives them sort of this confidence that things are going to get better in 5 years' time? And there is another, I'm sorry to be long, there's another point that I want to make.
Take your time, Marwan, please.
Today, the Americans and others also are saying, well, fine, Netanyahu is a hardliner. All we need to do is wait until Netanyahu leaves power and a more reasonable, open-minded prime minister comes that is ready to end the occupation and start negotiations based on two states. Really? I mean, we have seen what Israelis have done. They passed a law in the Knesset in July against the establishment of a Palestinian state with the support of every major Israeli, Jewish Israeli political party. Today, the shift towards the right in Israel, in Israeli society, is not a transient affair. It has been going on for the last 20, 30 years, and it's not going to reverse anytime soon, if ever. And so, the whole premise that the Americans are founding, even if it is in good faith, even it is, the whole premise that they are basing their policy on is false.
I tend to fully agree with you, Marwan. Dr. Barghouti, this brings me back to you for at least on two levels. First of all,
Yes.
if the war is widened, if we go towards a wider conflict, this is, I think, something Netanyahu would love in order to, in a way, dissolve the Palestinian issue. It will become a marginal aspect of the whole conundrum in the region. And second, Marwan mentioned something I think very important, and you alluded to it before, and Hisham also alluded to it, that Netanyahu doesn't have any interlocutor in the region for reshaping a new regional order. But without getting into plot theories and etc., I think that there are leaders in the Arab world, at least in the Gulf or elsewhere, who are maybe preparing for a new management of what remains of the Palestinian territories after the Gaza war. Is this integrated in the calculus of a Palestinian actor once the dust settles?
Yes, of course. And there are maybe three issues here I have to comment on. First of all, I do agree that there are governments in the region, especially those who normalized with Israel, who are ready to go along with Netanyahu. You can just watch some of their TV stations and you will be surprised how much they are bringing in constantly the Israeli narrative. And clearly, there is not only readiness to accept what Israel is doing. Netanyahu is talking about military alliance with some of these countries and is using Iran as the monster that he wants to besiege and that is threatening the countries in the region and so on and so forth. So yes, I do agree that some governments are ready to accept what Netanyahu is doing, but they're marginal. I mean, the Abraham Accords and all these agreements with Israel did not change much, really, because we are talking about marginal countries. I mean, in relationship to what can happen in the long run. As long as Saudi Arabia is continuing to refuse to normalize with Israel, and that has been the stand of Saudi Arabia officially and unofficially, and Netanyahu knows that very well and very clear. Now, I do agree with what Dr. Marwan said, that the whole Israeli establishment, political establishment, has shifted to the extreme right. But I would say even worse than extreme right. I mean, it has shifted to fascism. And I know it must be a hard word for some people to use, but the reality is that we've never seen any similar situation of rise of extremism and vicious, aggressive behavior towards the people, even internally in Israel, as we have seen today in Israel. And I can't remember any other case except maybe the rise of Nazis in Germany. You see not only fascist parties and fascist soldiers and fascist officers, you see a society in general that is adopting a fascist approach towards Palestinians. Now, going back to the main issue, I still believe that many analysts get confused because they think if the peace process is liquidated, then the Palestinian issue is liquidated. That's not true. In reality, in my opinion, Netanyahu has driven Israel into a much larger confrontation, not only with with a whole new generation, even including the majority of the democratic young people, the majority of the democratic young people in the Democratic Party in the United States, even in confrontation with a serious number of Jewish young Israelis in the United States who are participating now in solidarity campaigns with the Palestinian people. He has transformed Israel into an entity that is becoming a pariah structure. And I hope you wouldn't think that I'm exaggerating, but let me give you one example. I've just come back from a major meeting of 119 political parties, social democratic parties, including many parties that govern states like Germany and Norway and others. And in that meeting, two things happened that never happened before. We had a resolution about the Palestinian issue. Each time we tried to present a resolution that condemns Israel, all the Western parties and others will manage one way or another to avoid the voting because they don't want to harm Israel. Or they would insist that any statement should be negotiated with the Israeli side. This was the first time ever in the whole group of the social democratic parties worldwide where a resolution condemning Israel was passed by voting, and Israel got only 3 votes. That was one indication. The second indication was that Israeli party, which is called the Democrats, which is headed now by a deputy chief of, old ex-deputy chief of staff in Israel, a war criminal, of course, tried to get to the board of that structure, and for the first time, they were ruled out. The only party that was a candidate that was ruled out of the board was the Israeli party. This is a change. What we see here is a continuation. I don't know what you call it, confrontation. I don't like the word conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. This is a struggle, a Palestinian struggle for liberation, for freedom, as it should be described. It's not a dispute between two sides over a piece of land, as all the peace processes tried to present it. It's not a dispute between two people who are equally guilty. It's a dispute between an oppressor, an occupier, and an occupied and oppressed. What will be the determining factor for the future? Two things. The first thing is the continuation of Palestinian steadfastness and presence on the ground of Palestine. If we stay, and that for me is the most important militant goal today, is that Palestinian people stay in Palestine. If we stay, then the Zionist movement has failed. And they will not be able to conduct all their plans that they are talking about. And the second factor is that our demographic presence in Palestine should not be a passive presence, but should be a presence of resistance. This war at one point will maybe stop or become less dramatic, but eventually the Palestinians will have to decide, we have to decide, what form of struggle we should use in the coming days, and what kind of unified Palestinian struggle should be conducted. But in my opinion, the two-state solution has brought this situation back to what it is, a struggle between a liberation Palestinian force and those who are colonizing, oppressing, and occupying Palestinians. What can be the future? If Israel has killed the two-state solution, obviously, with all these settlements and all its behavior, there are only one of two options. Ethnic cleansing, which is exactly Netanyahu's plan, or one democratic state with equal rights for everybody. These are the only two options. And the world has to be clear about it. And let me just finalize here with one thing, one statement. All these European countries and the United States and some other countries who keep talking about two-state solutions without saying three things, without demanding the immediate end of all of the occupation of both West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, without demanding the removal of all Israeli illegal settlements, and without recognizing the Palestinian state, all their talk about two-state solution is nothing but hypocrisy that is aiming to give Israel more time, enough time, to finish the job of annexation, colonization of Palestinian land.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa. This is very strong. We are starting to run out of time. I want to, because we mentioned, some of you mentioned the Arab setting, the Arab official setting. We have two former officials from the Arab League, and I would like to ask you, Dr. Hiti and Hisham, about the Arab League. Two quick questions, or two questions and answers, if you can answer them as quickly as possible. First of all, what is your assessment of the Arab League's quote-unquote performance during the last year of war? I don't want to be cruel, but I would beg for an answer here. And the second one is, what could it do now with what we have in hand? I mean, what we have on the table, what is remaining on the table? What could be an Arab League's course, an Arab official position's course towards this conflict? Let me start with you, Dr. Hiti.
Well, let me say what I've said perhaps very rapidly before. The diplomacy of schizophrenia, and my good friend Hisham will remember, we spoke about it, and I've written about it, and there was an official that we adopt resolutions, but we don't try to translate these resolutions into policies. They are usually declaratory, wishful things, basically. And that's the basic problem that really destroyed practically entirely, and being very direct about it, any seriousness, any credibility about a collective action, so collective diplomatic action on behalf of the Arab League. We're still in the same boat, as you say. There are the three P's. What I say, if you adopt a position, you have to invest the necessary power. I'm not talking about military power, all kinds of power behind that position to translate it into a policy. And this is never done. This is never done, unfortunately. But one of the basic results of the ongoing war today and ongoing Israeli aggression today is that you cannot discard the transnational solidarities within the Arab world and beyond the Arab world with the Palestinian issue. Not necessarily out of ideology, but out of a policy, out of a feeling of solidarity, identity-based solidarity, regardless of how we define this identity-based solidarity. And this will put much more pressure on our governments to have to put their acts together. I'm not saying they will succeed in putting their acts together or they're willing to do so, but this is where we are. We are at a crosspoint. If we remain in this situation, there is absolutely no credibility for an Arab, yielding of power or necessary power in a diplomatic act or a diplomatic process at this stage. We spoke about the ongoing situation. I mentioned about kicking the can, that we are buying time, not we, those who are buying time, just trying to manage the conflict, to de-escalate the conflict, but it's investing in more conflicts in the future, more intensive conflict, more violent conflict, making the conflict more attractive and more vulnerable for all kinds of interferences, use and misuse for other purposes. The other policy is to adopt really a policy to say, do we need to go for a one-state solution or do we need to go for the two-state solution, but invest your force, your power, to have credibility in pushing for this policy. And we're very far away from this situation, unfortunately.
Merci. Hisham, your take on this?
Well, let me give you a comparison between what the Arab countries have done in the wars 2008, 2009, 2014, and this war. In 2008, 2009, there was a delegation headed by the Secretary General and the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Saud al-Faisal at the time, and around 8 ministers, Egypt, Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and more, to stop the war. And as a result of the effort that was done there in the Security Council, a resolution 1860 was adopted to stop the war. In 2014, the war remained 51 days. We did not go to the Security Council at all. This time around, yes, we went to the Security Council several times and took vetoes from the United States. So the question is the political will of the Arab countries at the end of the day. Yes, the Arab League itself can do more, and the Secretary General can do more. But at the end of the day, it is the countries that will have to send a serious message to those who are concerned in order for this to take place. Mind you, this is a problem that is not limited to the Arab League this time around. Had we met a year ago, a few days after the war, I don't think that any of us would have expected this war to remain for 1 year. I don't think that anybody expected it to do that. But now that we are in for over a year, we're saying that it will continue. Even countries that were quiet at the outset and started to take steps and are willing to take steps are too hesitant, and it became too little too late. We saw Macron 2 days ago saying that we should stop sending weapons to Israel. We saw the UK suspend a few licenses for export and so on. Even the US, at one point in time when they thought, well, we have to do something about it, it was too little too late, to the extent that it became ineffective. So there is a lot of blame to go around for everybody in as far as this conflict is concerned.
Okay, thank you, Hisham, because I mean, what you said at the end is the perfect way I would like to end this fascinating webinar, and very worrying also. We started with one single question, and I will end it with one single question to you all. And since we are talking about a year after October 7, my question would be very simple, and I would beg for a quick answer. Do you think that we are in for a new year of this ongoing nightmare or not? Dr. Mustafa, your take on that.
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. And I don't know if the scale of the military operation will be the same. Military operations will be the same. But Israel is now expanding occupation by full occupation of Gaza Strip. Netanyahu has not given up yet on the idea of ethnic cleansing of Gaza. The last 3 days, I was in touch with our colleagues there all the time. In the last 3 days, he's trying to evict the population of Jabalia, of Beit Lahia, of north of Gaza, to the middle and southern areas. And he's still dreaming about total ethnic cleansing of Gaza, because for him, this is a serious solution of part of the demographic problem if he can get rid of 2.3 million Palestinians. So I don't see that Israel is going to end its occupation of Gaza. They try to maintain their presence. They are expanding their operations in Lebanon. I am worried about the fact that they might conduct two-flank military operation, ground operation, not only towards Litani, but also towards Beqa. That's what some of their crazy generals are thinking about, to cut Syria from Lebanon. So there is every chance that this could go on. But at the end of the day, I think Israel will be drowning in a very deep crisis. First of all, I don't want to talk too long because this is the end of this webinar, but it's important to mention 3 factors that will affect Israel. The first one is the human losses. And the second factor is that Israel is going into the deepest economic crisis ever. It was downgraded, their economy was downgraded already twice. They have huge deficit. And third, it is estimated, according to Israeli sources, that at least up till now, 600,000 Israelis have left Israel. And maybe more will leave. What will stop Israel? Not the United Nations, not Security Council, not the Arab League for sure, and not the American administration. What will restrain Israel is Palestinian and Lebanese and other resistance, in addition to what we hope for, which is a rise of the boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign against Israel. The reality is that we are in confrontation, and it will not stop soon.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. Thank you. Thank you for so much. Dr. Masher, please.
I want to end with a concluding thought. First of all, I agree with everything Mustafa said, so I'm not going to repeat it. But something is happening that we are not particularly paying attention to. The Zionist project is dying. The Zionist project, which is, a project of the late 19th century, which promised Jews around the world a democratic, for the Jews, of course, not for the Arabs, secular Jewish state in historic Palestine that would live in peace forever and ever. But look at the situation today. Israel is no longer Jewish. It has a majority of Arabs. It is not a democratic country, even for the Jews. We all remember, the demonstrations of last year against the judicial system and all that. It is increasingly not secular. Today, there is a marriage of the extreme right in Israel, the extreme national right, and the extreme religious right in Israel. And it's certainly not living in peace. What is left of the Zionist project? Israel talks about reshaping the Middle East. I think they need to look internally and find out that their own project is not working, let alone trying to reshape others' project. The Israeli project is dying today. And a future in the region, a future of coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians cannot be based on Zionism.
That's a very, thought-giving questions, Marwan. I think we'll have to maybe devote another session on this question. Dr. Hitti, Minister Hitti, please.
Just very briefly, yes, I believe we are in a war of attrition. As I said before, as my colleagues have mentioned, open-ended war of attrition with ups and downs, escalation and de-escalation. And if we stop it, if it will be stopped, it'll be stopped on the basis that we will go back to war one more time, because that is really, we are not on the path of a true solution, whether it's a two-state solution or a one-state solution, as my good friend Marwan Ashir has mentioned. But last but not least, Israel in a deep structural crisis, internal structural crisis on even Israeli identity structural crisis, and also structural crisis on strategic acceptance in the region. All your force, and I'm talking from a very realistic, not wishful thinking approach, doesn't make you being accepted to your immediate environment and the environment beyond your immediate environment.
Thank you very much, Nassif. Hisham, your last comment?
Well, I agree with the general sentiment that was mentioned about the continuation of the war. But then at the end of the day, the Israeli army has its limits. So they have been saying for the last few weeks that the military action in Gaza has been completed and there is not much that can be done. And now the situation moved to Lebanon, but then Gaza is not quite. And it is not clear how they will deal with this situation, because they cannot continue the war in Gaza forever, but they also do not want to have a ceasefire. And the West Bank is becoming more and more tense. So we will have some escalation in the West Bank. As you know, in Lebanon, it is only the beginning, and they wanted the ground invasion, and they are having difficulty in the ground invasion. So, and after all that, we have to wait and see the response of Israel to Iran, and whether this response will lead to another retaliatory measure on the Iranian side. So all this doesn't augur well in relation to how this would develop. There are problems in Israel, but I think equally on the other side, whether it's the Palestinians who have to unite or whether it's the Arab world who have to get their act together, we also have our work cut out for us as well.
Thank you very much, Hisham. I need to apologize for the many questions on the chat box, but I think that we have answered most of them, or at least we have tried to. We have to stop now. Everything has to come to an end. Mustafa Barghouti is now on screen. Hello, Dr. Mustafa. Thank you for having joined.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. I think modestly we had a very, very interesting conversation. We opened up a lot of avenues for thinking in the future. So we promise you to keep on thinking about this issue. We'll have regular meetings about this topic. Unfortunately, this is ongoing, and we will have to tackle this in the coming months and maybe longer. I wanted to thank you all, you four, Dr. Barghouti, Dr. Mashir, Dr. Hitti, Dr. Hisham, if you allow me to doctorify you. I thank all the attendees, and I thank the IFI team who has helped in putting up this webinar in very, very difficult circumstances, as you can guess, here in Lebanon. Thank you all on behalf of the AUB's Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs, and to other webinars to come on this issue and other issues. Thank you, and good evening all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.